It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the tank engine's blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling very pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either," added Percy. Well, anyway, huffed Thomas, "blue is the only color for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his trucks full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Careful," he warned. "Watch out with those silly trucks." Go on, muttered the truck. "And by the way," went on Thomas, "those buffers don't look very safe to me." The last load poured down. "Help! I'm choking!" cried Thomas. "Get me out!" Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. "Ha ha," chuckled Percy. "You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful." "I'm not disgraceful," choked Thomas. "You did that on purpose. Get me out." It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. "Poor Thomas," whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to the Fat Controller's Railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his trucks from the junction. The trucks were heavy and Percy was tired. "Have a drink," said his driver, "then you'll feel better." The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. "Oh!" wailed Percy. "Help!" The buffers were broken and Percy was wheel-deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. "Now Percy has learned his lesson too," he chuckled to himself. That night, the two engines made up their quarrel. "I didn't cause your accident on purpose, Thomas," whispered Percy. "You do know that, don't you?" "Of course," replied Thomas, "and I'm sorry I was cheeky. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal."
Edward was getting old. His bearings were worn and he clanked as he puffed along. He was taking empty cattle cars to a market town. The sun shone, birds sang. But Edward was heading for trouble. Come on, he puffed. Oh, screamed the cars. Edward puffed and clanked, the cars rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken and some cars were left behind. Edward felt a jerk, but didn't take much notice. He was used to cattle cars. Bother those cars, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and boasted. See, allowing cows to break your train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Old Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. Boop, boop. Mind the cows. Hurry, puffed Gordon. Don't make such a fuss, grumbled his coaches. A long stretch of line lay ahead. In the distance was a bridge. It seemed to Gordon that there was something on the bridge. His driver thought so too. Whoa, Gordon, he said and shut off steam. Phew, said Gordon. It's only a cow. Shoo! He moved slowly onto the bridge, but the cow wouldn't shoo. She had lost her calf and felt lonely. Bleh, she said sadly. Everyone tried to send her away, but she wouldn't go. Henry arrived. What's this? A cow? I'll soon settle her. Be off! Bleh. Henry backed away nervously. I don't want to hurt her. At the next station, Henry's conductor told them about the cow and warned the signalman that the line was blocked. That must be Bluebell, said the porter. Her calf is here, looking for her mother. Percy will take her along. At the bridge, Bluebell was very pleased to see her calf again, and the porter led them away. Not a word. Keep it secret, whispered Gordon and Henry to each other. They felt rather silly, but the story soon spread. Well, chuckled Edward. Two big engines afraid of a cow. Afraid? Rubbish, said Gordon. We didn't want the poor thing to hurt herself by running up against us. We stopped so as not to excite her. You see what I mean, my dear Edward? Yes, Gordon, said Edward. Gordon felt somehow that Edward saw only too well. up passengers from Thomas's train. Beep, beep. We're late. Where is Thomas? He doesn't usually make us wait. Oh, dear, what can the matter be? Sang the fireman. Johnny's so long, and never you mind about Johnny, laughed the driver. Just you climb on the cab and look for Thomas. Can you see him? No, replied the fireman. There's Bertie bus in a tearing hurry. No need to bother with him, though. Likely he's on a coach tour or something. He clambered down. Stop! Stop! I've got Thomas's passengers, wailed Bertie, roaring up to the gates. It was no good. Edward was gone. Bother, said Bertie. Bother Thomas's fireman not coming to work today. Why did I promise to help the passengers catch the train? That will do, Bertie, said his driver. A promise is a promise, and we must keep it. I'll catch Edward or bust, said Bertie. Oh, my gears and axles, he groaned, toiling up the hill. I'll never be the same bus again. Hooray, hooray, I see him, cheered Bertie as he reached the top. Oh, no, Edward's at the station. No, he stopped at a crossing. Hooray, hooray. Bertie tore down the hill. Well done, Bertie, shouted his passengers. Go it. Bertie skidded into the yard. Wait, wait, cried Bertie. He was just in time to see Edward puff away. I'm sorry, said Bertie. Never mind, said the passengers. After him quickly. Third time lucky, you know. Do you think we'll catch him at the next station, driver? There's a good chance, replied the driver. Our road keeps close to the line, and we can climb hills better than Edward. I'll just make sure. He spoke to the station master. Bertie and the passengers waited impatiently. Yes, we'll do it this time, said the driver. Hooray! Called the passengers as Bertie chased after Edward once more. Grumbled the coaches as Edward snorted in front. They reached the top at last and ran smoothly into the station. Beep, whistled Edward. Get in quickly, please. The conductor blew the whistle, and Edward's driver looked back. But the flag didn't wave. Then he heard Bertie. Everything seemed to happen at once, and the station master told the conductor and driver what had happened. I'm sorry about the chase, Bertie, said Edward. My fault, replied Bertie. Late at junction, you didn't know about Thomas's passengers? Beep, beep. Goodbye, Bertie. We're off, whistled Edward. 3 cheers for Bertie, called the passenger. Bertie raced back to tell Thomas that all was well. Thank you, Bertie, for keeping your promise, said Thomas. You're a very good friend indeed. Sir Topham Hatt works his engines hard, but they are very proud when he calls them really useful. I'm going to the scrapyard today, Edward called to Thomas. What, already? You're not that old, replied Thomas cheekily. Thomas was only teasing. The scrapyard is full of rusty old parts and machinery. They're broken into pieces, loaded into cars, and Edward pulls them to the steelworks where they are melted down and used again. Today, there was a surprise waiting for Edward in the yard. It was a traction engine. "Hello," said Edward. "You're not broken and rusty. What are you doing here?" "I'm Trevor. They're going to break me up next week." "What a shame," said Edward. "My driver says I only need some paint, polish, and oil to be as good as new, but my owner says I'm old-fashioned." Edward snorted. "People say I'm old-fashioned, but I don't care. Sir Topham Hatt says I'm a useful engine. What work did you do?" "My owner would send us from farm to farm. We threshed corn, hauled logs, and did lots of other work. The children loved to see us." Trevor shut his eyes, remembering. "Oh, yes, I like children." Edward set off for the station. "Broken up, what a shame. Broken up, what a shame. I must help Trevor, I must." He thought of all his friends who liked engines, but strangely, none of them would have room for a traction engine at home. "It's a shame, it's a shame," he hissed. Then, beep, beep. Why didn't I think of him before? There on the platform was the very person. "Hello, Edward. You look upset." "What's the matter, Charlie?" he asked the driver. "There's a traction engine in the scrapyard, Vicar. He'll be broken up next week. Jem Cole says he never drove a better engine." "Do save him, sir. He saws wood and gives children rides." "We'll see," replied the vicar. Jem Cole came on Saturday. "The Reverend is coming to see you, Trevor. Maybe he'll buy you." "Do you think he will?" asked Trevor. "He will when I've lit your fire and cleaned you up." The vicar and his two boys arrived that evening. Trevor hadn't felt so happy for months. He chuffered about the yard. "Show your paces, Trevor," said the vicar. Later, he came out of the office smiling. "I've got him cheap, Jem, cheap." "Do you hear that, Trevor?" cried Jem. "The Reverend saved you, and you'll live at the vicarage now." "Beep, beep," whistled Trevor. Now Trevor's home is in the vicarage orchard, and he sees Edward every day. His paint is spotless, and his brass shines like gold. Trevor likes his work, but his happiest day is the church fair. With a wooden seat bolted to his bunker, he chuffers round the orchard, giving rides to children. Long afterward, you'll see him shut his eyes, remembering. "I like children," he whispers happily. One day, James had to wait at the station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Late again! Edward laughed and James fumed away. After James had finished his work, he went back to the yard and puffed onto the turntable. He was still feeling very bad-tempered. Edward is impossible, he grumbled to the others. He clanks about like a lot of old iron, and he is so slow, he makes us wait. Thomas and Percy were indignant. Old iron? Slow? Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really, said James. I should like to see him do it. Next morning, James's driver was suddenly taken ill. He could hardly stand, so the fireman uncoupled James ready for shunting. James was impatient. Suddenly, the signalman shouted. There was James puffing away down the line. All traffic halted, called the signalman. Then he told the fireman what had happened. Two boys were on James's footplate fiddling with the controls. Phew. They tumbled off and ran when James started. The signalman answered the telephone. Yes? He's here. Right. I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope. What for? Wondered the fireman. Search me, but you'd better get them quickly. The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and the rope. Good man, jump in. We'll catch him, puffed Edward. James was laughing. What a lark, he chuckled to himself. Suddenly, he was going faster and faster. He realized that he had no driver. What shall I do? I can't stop. Help! Help! We're coming, called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, he caught up with James. Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engines swayed and lurched. At last, got him, he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. So, the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I'm sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. A fine piece of work, he said. James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended. Oh, thank you, sir, said Edward. It'll be lovely not to clank.
Trevor, the traction engine, enjoyed living in the vicarage orchard. Edward came to see him every day, but sometimes Trevor didn't have enough work to do. "I do like to keep busy all the time," he sighed one day. "And I do like company, especially children's company." "Cheer up," smiled Edward. "The Fat Controller has work for you at his new harbour. I'm to take you to meet Thomas today." "Ah!" exclaimed Trevor happily. "A harbour! The seaside! Children! That will be lovely!" Thomas was on his way to the harbour with a trainload of metal pilings. They were needed to make the harbour wall firm and safe. "Hello, Thomas," said Edward. "This is Trevor, a friend of mine. He's a traction engine." Thomas eyed the newcomer doubtfully. "A what engine?" he asked. "A traction engine," explained Trevor. "I run on roads instead of rails. Can you take me to the harbour, please? The Fat Controller has a job for me." "Yes, of course," replied Thomas, but he was still puzzled. Workmen coupled Trevor's truck to Thomas's train, and soon they were ready to start their journey. "I'm glad the Fat Controller needs me," called Trevor. "I don't have enough to do sometimes, you know. Although I can work anywhere, in orchards, on farms, in scrapyards, even at harbours." "But you don't run on rails," puffed Thomas. "I'm a traction engine. I don't need rails to be useful," replied Trevor. "You wait and see." When they reached the harbour, they found everything in confusion. Trucks had been derailed, blocking the line, and stone slabs lay everywhere. "We must get these pilings past," said Thomas's driver. "They are essential. Trevor, we need you to drag them round this mess." "Just the sort of job I like," replied Trevor. "Now you'll see, Thomas. I'll soon show you what traction engines can do." Trevor was as good as his word. He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position. "Who needs rails?" he muttered cheerfully to himself. Later, Thomas brought Annie and Clarabel to visit him. Thomas was most impressed. "Now I understand how useful a traction engine can be." The coaches were full of children. Trevor gave them rides along the harbour. He liked this best of all. "He's very kind," said Annie. "He reminds me of Thomas," added Clarabel. Everyone was sorry when it was time for Trevor to go. Thomas pulled him to the junction. A small tear came into Trevor's eye. Thomas pretended not to see. He whistled gaily to make Trevor happy. "I'll come and see you if I can," he promised. "The vicar will look after you, and there's plenty of work for you now at the orchard. But we may need you again at the harbour someday." "That would be wonderful," said Trevor. That evening, Trevor stood remembering his new friend Thomas, the harbour, and most of all, the children. Then he went happily to sleep in the shed at the bottom of the orchard.
Percy works in the yard at the big station. loves playing jokes, but they can get him into trouble. One morning, he was very cheeky indeed. Beep, beep! Hurry up, Gordon. The train's ready. Gordon thought he was late. Ha 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 ha! Laughed Percy and showed him a train of dirty coal cars. Gordon thought how to get back at Percy for teasing him. Next, it was James's turn. Stay in the shed today, James. Sir Topham Hatt will come and see you. Ah, thought James. Sir Topham Hatt knows I'm a fine engine. He wants me to pull a special train. James's driver and fireman could not make him move. The other engines grumbled dreadfully. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last, the inspector arrived. Show a wheel, James. You can't stay here all day. Sir Topham Hatt told me to stay here. He sent a message this morning. He did not. How could he? He's away for a week. Oh, said James. Oh, where's Percy? Percy had wisely disappeared. When Sir Topham Hatt came back, he was cross with James and Percy for causing so much trouble. But the very next day, Percy was still being cheeky. I say, you engines, I'm to take some freight cars to Thomas's Junction. Sir Topham Hatt chose me especially. He must know I'm a really useful engine. More likely he wants you out of the way, grunted James. Gordon looked across to James. They were going to play a trick on Percy. James and I were just speaking about signals at the junction. We can't be too careful about signals, but then I needn't say that to a really useful engine like you, Percy. Percy felt flattered. We had spoken of backing signals, put in James. They need extra special care, you know. Would you like me to explain? No, thank you, James, said Percy. I know all about signals. Percy was a little worried. I wonder what backing signals are, he thought. Never mind, I'll manage. He puffed crossly to his freight cars and felt better. He came to a signal. Bother, it's a danger. The signal moved to show line clear. Its arm moved up instead of down. Percy had never seen that sort of signal before. Down means go, and up means stop. So upper still must mean go back. I know, it's one of those backing signals. Come on, Percy, said his driver. Off we go. Stop, you're going the wrong way. But it's a backing signal, Percy protested and told him about Gordon and James. The driver laughed and explained. Oh dear, said Percy. Let's start quickly before they see us. He was too late. Gordon saw everything. That night, the big engines talked about signals. They thought the subject was funny. Percy thought they were being very silly.
Do you know what? Asked Percy. What? Grunted Gordon. Do you know what? Silly. said Gordon. Of course I don't know what. If you don't tell me what is. The Fat Controller says that the work in the yard is too heavy for me. He's getting a bigger engine to help me. Rubbish, said James. Any engine could do it. If you worked more and chatted less, this yard would be a sweeter, a better, and a happier place. Percy went off to fetch some coaches. That stupid old signal, he thought. He was remembering the time he'd misunderstood a signal and gone backwards instead of forwards. No one listens to me now. They think I'm a silly little engine and order me about. I'll show them, but he didn't know how. By the end of the afternoon, he felt tired and unhappy. He brought some coaches to the station. Hello, Percy, said the Fat Controller. You look tired. Yes, sir, I am, sir. I don't know if I'm standing on my dome or my wheels. You look the right way up to me, laughed the Fat Controller. Cheer up. The new engine is bigger than you and can probably do the work alone. Would you like to help build my new harbor? Thomas and Toby will help. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The new engine arrived. What's your name? Asked the Fat Controller. Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague. Good. Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, show Duck round. The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly doing his work. He seems a simple sort of engine. We'll have some fun and order him about. Smoke billowed everywhere. Percy was cross. Duck took no notice. They'll get tired of it soon. They tell you to do things, Percy. Yes, they do, answered Percy. Right, said Duck. We'll soon stop that nonsense. You whispered something. We'll do it later. The Fat Controller was looking forward to hot buttered toast for tea at home. Suddenly he heard an extraordinary noise. Whee! Bother, he said, and hurried to the yard. Duck and Percy calmly sat on the points outside the shed, refusing to let the engines in. Gordon, James, and Henry were furious. Stop that noise, bellowed the Fat Controller. They won't let us in, hissed Gordon. Duck explained this behavior. Beg pardon, sir, but I'm a Great Western engine. We do our work without fuss. But begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these engines that we only take orders from you. Silence! Snapped the Fat Controller. Percy and Duck, I am pleased with your work today, but not with your behavior tonight. You have caused a disturbance. Gordon, Henry, and James sniggered. As for you, thundered the Fat Controller, you've been worse. You made the disturbance. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders. After Percy went away, Duck was left to manage alone. He did so, easily.